Hi everyone, we are back for section 9.5b, the quadratic formula and discriminant. So this is going to be more practice with using the quadratic formula, but it's also looking at what happens before you take the square root of something. So the discriminant tells you how many solutions and what type of numbers, rational or irrational. How many? 0, 1, or 2. Those are your options. So 0, 1, or 2, rational or irrational. So it gives you a piece of information before you keep working on the quadratic formula. It is actually the part of the quadratic formula that's underneath the square root. So if I put the quadratic formula up over here, it's so nice to have a shortcut for quadratic formula. Don't you wish you did? X equals, we are looking at just this. So when I do the math, b squared minus 4ac, which is what I ask you to do anyway when we're actually solving the quadratic formula, right? Because that's the easiest thing to do. Find that number underneath there before you take the square root. So today it's just a matter of pause, think about that number and what it tells you, and then you can keep going on. So let's talk about this. Let's find the discriminant, and then we'll talk about that little chart. So my equation, my quadratic equation is y equals 2x squared minus 5x plus 4. So I'm still going to identify my a, b, and c. I am going to say, all right, well, a is 2, what's b, and what's c? So now, whoops, yep. If I think about my quadratic formula, and I know it's going to be that b squared minus 4ac, I'm going to put that over on the side. I'm going to do b squared minus 4ac. I'm not going to do any square rooting with it. So b squared, man, we've had a lot of negative squaring. I guess I'm testing you. 4 times a times c. Well, a is 2 and c is 4. So let's do this math problem. You could type it straight into your calculator. Just remember, be careful. When you square a negative number, that's 25 minus 32. And 25 minus 32 is negative 7. So negative 7, if you didn't follow that math, go back and look at, just type it into your calculator. Look at what I did. I did it mental math this time. The discriminant is negative 7. Discriminant is a nice word, isn't it? So if I put a negative 7 underneath this square root sign right here, regardless of what the other stuff is, and I try to take the square root of that, what would you tell me the solution is? Knowing that we did all this other stuff, we hit a roadblock right there, right? Because when you go to your calculator and you take the square root of negative 7, you get some kind of error message. When you get that error message, we know it's no solution. So that 7 with the negative tells us something about our solutions, how many and what kind. We could finish, well, we couldn't finish solving this. We could finish solving others if we wanted, but we know how many solutions there will actually be. There will be no solutions at all because we can't square root a negative. So I'm going to go to the bottom of this chart right here. It says down here the discriminant is less than 0. What kind of number, what kind of sign is less than 0? So this means your discriminant is a negative number, correct? Negative number, we just decided there is no solution. Feel free to put the no solution sign. Don't write 0. 0 is a solution. If our discriminant is equal to 0, are you okay with me working my way from the bottom? Discriminant is equal to 0. So in other words, underneath that square root sign, after I do the math, I'm going to take the square root of 0. I would have something like 8 plus 0 divided by 2 and 8 minus 0 divided by 2. I'm going to have one rational solution. That's the only time we get one. That's that double root thing we talked about when we graphed. You only end up with one answer. And then we've got these two up at the top. Both of these, the discriminant is greater than 0. Actually, I'll highlight that because it looks like I'm make it an or equal to or something crazy. Discriminants are both greater than 0. What's the sign on greater than 0? So both of these are positive numbers underneath the discriminant, but the top one, you've got yourself a perfect square, like 100 or 49 or 256. They're all perfect squares. They come out nice and neat. These are my favorite kinds because you have two rational solutions. You're going to have nice, neat answers like 6 and -4. If your discriminant's positive but not a perfect square, like 304 or 5, you're still going to have two solutions, but they're going to have to be rounded. We're going to have two irrational solutions when we do the quadratic formula. So the discriminant gives you a clue along the way of what kind of answers you should be getting. Remember, two rational solutions could be like 1.5 and 5.5 because 5.5 is a rational number. You didn't have to round it. It didn't keep going in your calculator. So irrational is when your numbers make no sense, like when you're acting irrationally. They keep going and you do not, can't make any sense. You end up having to round them. So let's talk about this first one. Y equals x squared, or 2x squared plus 4x plus 2. Already equal to 0. All the same rules apply as far as it has to be equal to 0 or equal to y. What's my a value in this problem? B and C. So I'm not even going to do the quadratic formula. The directions say find the number and type of solutions. I don't want to know what the solutions are. I want to know that there are two rational solutions or something like that. So I'm just going to stick to b squared minus 4ac. And I'm going to plug this in and I'm going to figure out what that tells me if I took the square root of it. So b squared, we've got a 4 to the second power minus 4 times my a value 2 times my b value, or c value 2, sorry, 4ac. Type it into your calculator or do the parts, mental math. 16 minus 16 equals 0. So my discriminant is 0. What kind of solutions and how many will there be if you have a discriminant equal to 0? And I never really memorized this. I always think, well, if I took the square root of 0, it's a positive and negative 0, right? So I only have one answer there because there's no such thing really as a positive or negative 0. So I end up with one rational root. So these are the two things that I'm looking for. I'm looking for this answer right here, and I'm looking for the discriminant came out to the actual number 0. Does this seem easy to everybody? It's actually even less work than the quadratic formula, but it's like halfway through. It's checking to see what happens before we finish. So let's do one more. Let's do number 4. Let's skip 2 and 3 for now. Have you noticed that I've been using the skipped ones to practice in class? I do that on purpose, or like for the warm-up. So number 4, y equals x squared minus 5x minus 2. It's already equal to y or equal to 0. So we can identify our a, b, and c. If you don't want to write a, b, and c, you certainly don't have to, but I think it just helps to keep everything straight. You don't have to think quite so hard. So my a value is 1, b is -5, and c is -2. So when we do b squared minus 4ac, I want to know the value of the discriminant and what it tells you about how many and the type of roots. So b squared would be -5 minus 4 times 1 times -2. Watch those signs. So when I do this math, I get a 25 plus 8. Or my discriminant equals 33. Double check that math. I actually do mental math for the signs. I look at it's a negative times a negative, so I know that this sign's going to have to be a positive. Just watch that stuff. And of course, we all know when you square a negative number, the answer is always positive. So discriminant is 33. 33 is a positive number. Is 33 a perfect square? No, it is not. Try it. Take the square root of 33 out of your calculator and tell me if you get a nice neat number or if you get an irrational one. So since it's positive, we have two solutions. Since it's not a perfect square, they are irrational. Two irrational solutions. If I asked you to finish that problem using the quadratic formula, you would eventually have to take the square root of 33 and get some crazy number, 5 point something, 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 and you'd have to round it. So two irrational solutions. All right. So what I would like you to tell me is, how does thinking about the discriminant help as you're solving when you're using the quadratic formula? Where could you use this as you are solving? And for your practice problem, how many and what type of solution does y equals 4x squared plus 4x minus 1/2? So just find the discriminant and tell me what that tells you. Have a great day. We'll see you next time for 9-6.